Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review. Today we're looking at the Massdrop THX AAA 789 amplifier, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's worth getting your mouth around because it's an incredible amplifier. It was a limited edition product made in collaboration between Massdrop and THX, and I can tell you that it's a really impressive bit of kit. It was launched in limited numbers, only 480 units. It was $350 US, and it should be way more expensive than that because it's incredible. So let's get into it so I can tell you all about it. So as I mentioned before, this was a collaborative effort between Massdrop and THX. And the collaboration was specifically around THX's technology called AAA Technology. And what that stands for is achromatic audio amplifier. Achromatic meaning colorless or with no color. And the goal was to produce an amplifier technology that was completely transparent, that did nothing to change the sound, that purely amplified it. You may have heard the term wire with gain before. That was their idea here. So it's like having a wire from your output, your DAC, through to your headphones that just increases the volume but does nothing more than that. That was their intention, and I must say I think they've done a pretty good job of producing exactly that. When THX were looking at designing the AAA technology, what they were looking to do was get some of the benefits of an A-class amplifier, that being excellent sound quality, very low distortion figures, but doing away with some of the problems of a Type A amplifier, which is excessive heat and high power demands, meaning that you need to have a large transformer, lots of heat dissipation, so you end up with a big box that is quite hot most of the time. So what they did was they looked at Type B amplifier technologies, and without going into detail, the gist of it is that a Type A amplifier handles the entire waveform in one go. So from top to bottom, it's all done at once. In a Type B amplifier, the signal is actually split down the middle. So part of the amplifier takes care of the top half of the wave, the other part of the amplifier takes care of the bottom half of the wave, and that signal is then stitched back together. But in doing so, because those waves are never quite perfect, the top half and the bottom half, when you put them together, you get some distortion. So the reason Type B amplifiers even exist, given that they've got these problems of the two halves of the waves not being perfect, is because it's a much more efficient way to amplify the sound. There's a lot less heat generated and a lot less power required. So what THX were looking to do with the AAA technology was really combine the best of both worlds. They wanted the efficiency of the Type B, but the sound quality of the Type A. And so how they've done that is with a technology known as feed-forward technology. Essentially what they're doing is they're measuring the distortion within the amplifier that's caused by that hybrid Type A, Type B approach that they're using. They're then inverting that signal and using it to cancel out the distortion that is produced in the process. And what they're ending up with is a perfect audio signal, or at least very close to perfect. Now, I was really impressed to see the level of detail in the specifications and measurements that THX and Massdrop shared. It really shows that they're quite happy to be fully transparent about what this amplifier is capable of, and it's really impressive when you see the numbers, and we'll look at those in a moment. I should also mention that if you want more detail on how the AAA technology works, and particularly the feed-forward approach, there's a link in the description below through to an interview with the actual engineer of the AAA technology. He's talking about a different amplifier, but it's the same technology that's been built into the Massdrop THX 789. So do check out that link if you want more detail. It's quite a long watch, but if you're interested, it's a good watch. Okay, so I've moved over to my second camera now just to take you on a quick tour through the amplifier, connectivity, some of the key features that it has. So let's start by having a look at the back of the amplifier. So here you can see on the back, we'll go from the left to the right, we've got single-ended input, so you can run just straight RCAs in here. You can also have a pass-through. So what that means is you can take the signal straight out of the RCA and feed it to a second amplifier. In my case, the Burson Fun feeds off here as my preamplifier for my active speakers. I really like the fact that it has this. It makes it a very versatile device to have in your audio chain because it allows you to stack it with other items that do different things. Now, very importantly, we've also got here a pair of XLR connections. And that is because this is a fully balanced DAC. From end to end, you can go balanced in, balanced out, and the signal stays separate the whole way through. It also provides a lot more power that way. but we'll talk a bit more about that later on when we talk about the sound and some of the comparisons. Over here we've got the input for the inline power brick. Finally over here I wanted to point out this auto off or bypass switch. This allows you to have the amplifier switch itself automatically after a couple of hours. Now I'm going to talk about that for just a moment, because a lot of people with high quality audio will tend to leave their amplifier on the whole time, and they do that because it works best when it's warm. Because this is an AB hybrid type amplifier, it doesn't get that warm and it doesn't need to be warm. And so the benefit of this is you can actually have it switch itself off after a couple of hours. It will then obviously save your power bills, and only takes a few seconds to be ready to operate the moment you turn it on. You don't need to wait for it to get hot. Having said that, if you'd like to have your amplifier stay on the whole time, you can switch off the auto off function and have that bypass in action. Let's take a look at the front. So on the front of the amp now, you can see here we've got the power button. We've got our balanced output, which is a 4-pin XLR. You've got a single-ended 6.3mm output, and you've got a 3.5mm single-ended output. I love the fact that Massdrop and THX decided to provide all three outputs here. It means you're not fiddling around with adapters, you're not having to worry about which things you can and can't plug in. It's just whatever you want to plug in, you plug it in and away you go, which is fantastic. We've got a gain selector knob here, and that's got a nice notchy feel to it, selecting between 3 levels of gain. Now that gain varies slightly depending on whether you're in balanced or whether you're in single-ended mode, but I'll post all of the specs in the description so you can see it. The volume knob over here is silky and smooth. It's a really nice turning volume knob. It's also very, very balanced between the channels, even at very low volumes, which is really impressive. In fact, I haven't really tested for it specifically because I've barely noticed any imbalance when I've been using it day to day at low volumes. Finally over here we've got an input selector switch, which is just a very simple toggle between your RCA single-ended inputs and your XLR balanced inputs. I've already mentioned the auto off switch, the volume control, which is really nice and smooth and very well balanced right down to low volumes. The two other things I wanted to talk about was the power brick, which I mentioned before. So because this is this hybrid AB type amplifier, you don't need a massive power transformer. That also means, therefore, they can give us a switch mode power supply, which is the sort you'd be used to for your mobile phone, your laptop computer. It's the inline brick. So you've got a plug in the wall that connects to a brick, and then that gives us an output to the amplifier. Some audio purists don't like that kind of connection, and I can understand why, because traditionally they've been used in cheaper setups. But there are some benefits to switch mode power supplies. Namely, they're better at dealing with voltage fluctuation. So if you don't have perfect voltage, they're going to manage that okay as they transform the power to deliver whatever the amplifier needs. In the case of the Massdrop THX 789, it's a 24 volt feed. So whether you've got a 110 volt system or a 240 volt system or something similar to one of those in the country where you live, the power supply is going to work even if that dips a little bit low or goes a little bit high due to power fluctuations at different times of the day or night. So that's actually a benefit compared to a traditional A-class amplifier that might have a mains connection and a great big transformer in it. The other thing is that there is less likelihood of the switch mode power supply picking up noise. Now, switch mode power supplies produce noise, but the nice thing is it's predictable. The amplifier can be shielded from the noise that the engineers know the switch mode power supply is producing. So it's actually a really nice compromise, or maybe not even a compromise at all. It's a really nice benefit. Once again, if you wanted to watch that video I linked to in the description below, you can hear a bit more about the engineers' decisions around using the switch mode power supply. The final feature I want to talk about is just the quality of the design, the look of it, the feel of it. It's nice and compact, but it's also really well put together. There's this nice detailed venting along the top edge of it. Everything about it is just so much better than you'd expect from a $350 amplifier. I recently reviewed the Burson Audio Fun amplifier, and for a little bit less money for the stock version, the build quality is quite different. It's not, the Burson Audio Fun's quite a well-built amplifier, but this is just another level. Now, I should also mention that the Burson Audio Fun is designed to be pulled apart. This one is not. The Burson Audio Fun is designed to have you rolling op amps. This one's not. So they're not comparable exactly, but I did want to call out the fact that I think Massdrop and THX have done a fantastic job of building a beautiful, high quality looking amplifier at a really, really cheap price. Let's talk now about some of the key specifications of the 789 amplifier. So first of all, power output. It's a very powerful amplifier might be going too far, but it's quite powerful. It's very powerful depending on the impedance you connect to it, because at a 16 ohm or 32 ohm load, using the balanced outputs, you can actually produce 6,000 milliwatts or 6 watts to those headphones, which I have to say is a ridiculous amount of power. You're never going to need that much power. But the fact that it has it there means you've got headroom, meaning that the amp's never straining. Even on high dynamic swings in your music, it's never going to be clipping the sound or distorting the sound because it's pushing the edges of its limits. That said, when you go up in impedance, say to 300 ohms or 600 ohms, like a pair of Sennheisers at 300 ohms or Beyerdynamics at 600 ohms, you are going to get less power out of the amplifier. At its peak, so 600 ohms being the highest measured impedance that they've published, it's only going to produce 400 milliwatts. Now I say only, 400 milliwatts is still massively more than you actually need. There'll be those out there that will want to say that you need watts of power to drive headphones effectively. But the reality is, at 400 milliwatts with 600 ohms, so say a pair of Beyer T1 headphones, you can produce well in excess of 120 decibels. And once you get to 120 decibels, you're talking pain, physical pain in your ears. So the fact that they are taking us well beyond the threshold of pain means you've got plenty of headroom for normal listening, because I really hope you're not listening to it at a point that you're ever feeling pain. If you are, please pull it back, keep your ears intact so you can keep enjoying music. So there's plenty of power. We don't need to worry about power. Let's look at some of the other specifications. Distortion, noise, and crosstalk are all things that I tend to look for in an amplifier if I'm looking for a nice clean sound. THX have been able to produce an incredibly well measuring amplifier with ridiculously low noise, crosstalk, and distortion levels. So I've just pulled out a few of the key numbers here. Do have a look in the description for all of the specifications published on the Massdrop website, because it's quite impressive to see just how open and transparent they've been. But the things I wanted to point out is that basically at any impedance and any power level, the 789 amplifier is still producing total harmonic distortion, which is general distortion put through the sound signal as a result of the circuitry. It's still below 0.0001%, and that's really impressive. In some cases, depending on the load and whether you're going single-ended or balanced, it's actually significantly below 0.0001%. In terms of crosstalk, now crosstalk is the ability for one channel to influence the other channel. So it's essentially distorting, say, your left and your right channels. So the crosstalk measurements for this amplifier are at minus 127 decibels, and that's fantastic. It means that you're going to get really good stereo separation with no unwanted interference between the two channels. Finally, when we're talking about noise and distortion and similar numbers, we also want to look at the signal to noise ratio. So in other words, what's the base level of noise and at what level of output do you need before you actually can start to hear it? Now with the AAA technology, this is at 136 decibels. So you basically need to turn the thing up to full and then some before you're going to hear any noise out of it. It's incredibly quiet, incredibly silent. And that's fantastic because it can also drive very sensitive, low impedance in-ear monitors. And that leads us to the next thing I want to talk about, which is output impedance. Whenever you're connecting a pair of headphones to an amplifier, you do need to be aware of output impedance. Output impedance essentially governs how the amplifier interacts with your headphones. And if you have too high an output impedance, it can actually throw off the frequency response of your headphones. It can cause you to have more bass, more treble, less treble. It all depends on the impedance characteristics of the headphones themselves. And if you look at some headphones such as the Sennheisers and the Beyerdynamics, the very high impedance ones, or if you're looking at multi-driver in-ear monitors, they can have massive variations in their own impedance curves, which can then play havoc with an amplifier if it has high output impedance. The good news is you don't have to worry about that with the 789. With the 789 in balanced mode, it has an output impedance of below 0.1 ohm, and in single-ended mode, which is what I tend to use mostly for my in-ear monitors, it's at below 0.05 ohms. So that's a really impressive number, and it means you can literally plug anything you like into this amplifier with no issues whatsoever. If you're new to output impedance, a general good rule to work with is a rule of eighths. So you generally want your headphone that you're plugging in to have an impedance that is 8 times more than the output impedance of the amplifier. What it means though is that if you've got headphones or earphones with say 12 ohm or 16 ohm impedance, they're going to work just fine without any interference of the frequency response from this amplifier. So speaking of different headphones, different in-ear monitors, I've now tried the 789 with a wide range of different headphones. I've tried it with the Focal Clears, I've tried it with the AudioQuest Nighthawks, the Noble Kaiser 10 custom in-ear monitors, the Metzer Audio 99 Neos, and the SimGot EN700 Pro in-ear monitors. And without fail, everything I've plugged into it has sounded exactly perfect. Nothing changes its frequency response. I can't hear noise, I can't hear hiss. It's just a perfect experience with every single thing I've plugged into it. So for those unfamiliar with balanced and single-ended usage, with single-ended audio, what you're actually doing is you're sharing the ground channel between both the left and the right. So you've got a left positive, a right positive, but a shared ground. And that can lead to some noise issues sometimes. It can be more prone to picking up noise, but it can also mean that you get a bit more crosstalk through that. So there's the ability for some sound to leak through that shared ground and cause a bit of crosstalk to occur. In the case of an amplifier designed like this, it also means you're not using the full capabilities of the amplifier. You're only using part of the circuit, and therefore you're not going to get full power out of it. On the flip side, when we're talking about balanced audio, you have fully discrete positive and negative channels, or ground and active channels, for both left and right separately. So you're getting maximum audio channel separation. You're also going to get maximum power because you're using the full capabilities of this amplifier. In terms of this particular amplifier, using it balanced and single-ended, I can't do a direct comparison because I don't have comparable cables for both balanced and single-ended. And also my DAC that I use, which is the Shitgun multi-bit, that uses a higher voltage output for the balanced output, and so they're not exactly comparable outputs to start with. What I can tell you is that listening to single-ended and balanced input and output with this amplifier, audibly there's no significant difference that I can tell, taking into account that it's not exactly the same for the reasons I just said, different cables, different outputs from the DAC. What I can tell you is that both inputs and outputs from this amplifier sound fantastic regardless. Sure, it probably performs a little bit better with a bit more power using fully balanced, and on paper it says it's better, but I don't believe many people are going to be able to actually hear the difference if you match the volume output with, say, a sound pressure level meter. You're not going to probably tell the difference between whether you're using single-ended or balanced. So let's talk about sound quality, because ultimately that's what this is all about. How good does it sound? For $350 US, it's a really cheap amplifier in the scheme of things. There are people out there spending a couple of grand on amplifiers to try to get perfect sound. I have to say, I think Massdrop and THX have done an incredible job at achieving that wire with gain concept. This is one of the most transparent amplifiers that I've ever heard. And what I mean by that is, not only does it not color the sound, but because it is so clean, you're really not aware that there's an amplifier there at all. And I'll use an example of the Objective 2. I've listened to the Objective 2 amplifier many times. I've never liked it. I find that it adds a graininess or a dryness to the sound that I just don't enjoy. And that says to me that I can hear that there's an amplifier in the chain. Listening to the 789, I don't get any of that. I get perfect, crystal clear sound that I really can't tell there's an amplifier there. It is just like it's gotten a louder signal. There's no dryness, there's none of that sort of digital sound that some solid states can have. There's no warmth added, there's absolutely nothing added to it, and it's really impressive to hear. What comes with that is that there is extremely good layering of the sound, so you can hear each individual sound is perfectly placed to whatever quality the recording is. So if it's a good recording with good layering, you're going to get fantastic sound quality. You're going to get great separation between different instruments, so instruments that are here, here, and here in the soundstage, you're going to hear those clearly, as well as the depth cues. Now, because it is a very transparent amp, it's not going to do anything to enhance the sound. It's not going to make the soundstage seem bigger. It's not going to make it sound smaller either. It's not going to throw spatial cues that are more than what is actually in the original recording. And so it's very, very true to the source. Some people like coloration in their amps, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Others don't. So it all depends on what you're looking for. But for me, someone who generally does like a bit of coloration in my amps, I love this. I think this is just fantastic because it's not coloring negatively. So like the O2 that I mentioned before, where it got a bit dry and a bit harsh, This doesn't do that at all. It just gives me the music, and I really, really enjoy that. So I thought a good way to illustrate the sound quality of the 789 would be to give you a couple of comparisons. And I've only got a couple here, but they might be helpful. If you've read my review or watched my review of the Burson Audio Fun, you'll know that I really liked it paired with the V6 Vivid op amp. So that particular setup is $399 US. As I've already said, this is $350 US, so it's a little bit cheaper. They're obviously very different products. So the Burson Fun's designed for op amp rolling, the 789 isn't. The 789 has balanced connections and outputs, the Fun doesn't. The Fun can work as a preamp, the 789 can't. So you see that they've both got their own pros and cons, and I'm not for a second going to suggest that one is better than the other. They're very different products, and both of them are actually active right now in my desktop setup. Probably the biggest difference for me though, when I'm thinking about these purely from an audio quality point of view, is that the Fun is a colored amplifier. No matter which op amp I put into it, it always has a warm sound. It's a little bit mid-forward, it's a little bit bassier, and it's giving me that dynamic and engaging sound that I spoke about in the review. The 789, as I've already said, is pure transparency, and so it comes down to what you're looking for. One thing I know is that I don't think you could ever get the Fun to sound as clean and transparent as you can listen to the 789. That said, you can't tune the 789 at all. So they're very different beasts, and therefore, as I said before, I'd hate to say that one is better than the other. They're both just different products. What's impressive though, when you listen to the 789 in the context of the Fun, its ability to be transparent and to be completely invisible in the sound chain is very impressive at the price point. Let's do another comparison now, and a completely unfair one, which is the 789 up against the Bottlehead Mainline amplifier. Anyone that's been a reader of my blog for many years or knows me from Headphone will know that I'm a huge fan of Bottlehead's kit tube amplifiers, the top of the line being the Mainline amplifier. So my Mainline amplifier started as a US $1,200 amplifier. I've since upgraded some of the components in it. I don't know what it's worth now. It's probably equivalent to a $2,000 odd amplifier. So putting a $2,000 amplifier up against a $350 amplifier is probably a bit unfair, you'd think. But the amazing thing is the 789 holds its own. It's really quite incredible. And that's not just me talking in hyperbole. I love doing these unfair comparisons, but I never expect them to actually be a fair comparison. The 789 manages to do that, and it's pretty impressive. There's a couple of really obvious things we need to mention though. The Mainline is a tube amplifier, and that comes with all kinds of coloration. The distortion figures would never be anywhere close to this. So yes, it's more expensive. Yes, it has a spectacular sound quality, but it's not doing the same thing as the 789. So to talk about the two of them, I'd say the 789 is a flatter sound. So from bass through to treble, nothing is enhanced. Whereas the Mainline has a bit of a mid-forward sound, particularly with some of the modifications I've made. The sound from the 789 is also a drier sound, so the Mainline is quite smooth, quite mellow sounding. It's still detailed, but in comparison, it's much smoother than the 789. Not because the 789 is dry or harsh, like I mentioned the O2 amplifier can be, just that the Mainline is adding some coloration, and that's one of the benefits of tube amplifiers, is they tend to smooth things over a little bit. If you get a really good quality tube amplifier like the Mainline, the smoothing is done just right, so it never gets in the way of detail and clarity, but it can make the overall sound more enjoyable, and I do find that with the Mainline, it's just, for me, it's one of the most perfect amplifiers I've ever heard. It's not precision perfect, but it's perfect for me. So overall, I'd say that the 789 is actually more accurate than the Mainline. It's more true to life. It's actually more transparent in some ways. But I do really enjoy some of the subtleties and nuances and the way that the mid-range has got a little bit of extra weight and a little bit of extra presence from the Mainline. What I also find is that the soundstage from the Mainline tends to be slightly triangular. So the mids are a little bit forward and then everything else spreads away from you. A little bit like I described for the Fun. With the 789 though, the sound is dead flat, and therefore the soundstage is also really nice and flat. I'd describe the sound as probably arc-shaped. So it starts with you and then it spreads out from there, but in a very even circular type manner. And that's probably an ideal soundstage shape. So which would I choose out of the two? Honestly, I'm flipping between the two about equally. I love the fact that with a solid state amp like the 789, I don't ever think about, am I wasting tube life? Now, tubes last for a very long time, but in my head, occasionally I think, oh, I'm not really listening to this with any detail. I'd rather use a solid state amp and save the tubes for the times that I really want to listen to them. It's probably silly logic, but it's just how I work. The Mainline is probably my go-to amplifier when I'm looking for a really enjoyable, engaging listening experience. Whereas the 789 for me has probably become more of a reference. If I really want to hear what a recording is about, or I really want to hear what a pair of headphones is about, I'll turn to this every time. Whereas the Mainline is more my enjoyment listening amplifier. That's not to say this isn't highly enjoyable, it's just personal tastes. Some people, including the engineer in the interview I've linked to below, don't like the idea of an amplifier that colours the sound. Personally, I do, so long as it colours it well, and I love the way the Mainline colours the sound. For me, it's a preference choice, a bit like some people might use an equaliser. I use the amplifier to give that coloration and presentation that I really enjoy. So hopefully I've given you a good picture of the 789. Just to summarise though, the 789 is way better than it deserves to be. This amplifier has shocked me. I must admit that I bought it way back at the beginning of 2018. I bought it on a bit of a whim. I read a bit about the technology, thought this sounds interesting, let's give it a go. If nothing else, it'll be a good review to share with people. I am absolutely blown away with what I'm hearing. It's incredibly detailed, incredibly transparent, and for the price, it is just insane. So if you're into audio, I highly recommend that you sign up to Massdrop, and I'll put a link below. It's worth watching out to see if it ever comes back onto Massdrop, and I really hope it will. It's a brilliant amplifier. There deserves to be more of them in the world, and I highly recommend you pick one up if you're into your audio and you're looking for an amplifier. I can tell you that it's instantly become my second favorite amplifier of all time. Yes, all time. So I've listened to lots of different amplifiers, I've used lots of different amplifiers, I've owned quite a few different amplifiers, and this thing is just an immediate addition to my permanent desktop setup. It's really impressive, and it doesn't matter what you use it with, whether it's a super high-end quality headphone like the Focal Clears, or something a bit more affordable like the Metzer Audio 99 Neos. Both sound fantastic when they're driven by this. So I really recommend it, and I can't speak highly enough of it. As always, if you found this review helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to see future reviews. I've got some exciting things coming up, including some giveaways, so do be sure to subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Passion for Sound.